The saloon went dead silent. 6'3" Eleanor Morgan stood in the doorway, her shadow stretching across the whiskey-stained floorboards like a dark promise. The three men who laughed at her that morning called her a freak, said no man would ever want a woman who looked him in the eye now sat frozen at their card table, hands hovering over their guns. The entire town of Deadwood had heard what they'd done, how they humiliated her in front of the general store, made her the joke of the day. But what they didn't know, what nobody in that saloon understood yet, was that Eleanor Morgan had spent the last 5 years becoming something far more dangerous than a woman scorned. They called her Longshot Morgan, and the stories said she was the fastest draw west of the Mississippi. She'd just issued a challenge that would either make her a legend or leave her bleeding in the Dakota dust. Her hand rested on the pearl-handled Colt at her hip as she spoke for words that would echo through the Wild West forever. Draw when you ray ready. But to understand how we got to this moment, you have to go back to where it all began. Because Eleanor's story isn't just about revenge or gunfights. It's about a woman who was told she didn't fit into the world. So instead of shrinking to fit their boxes, she built a new world where the rules were written in gunpowder and grit. 5 years earlier, in the high society of Boston, 1878, Eleanor Hayes was 18 years old, 6'3" tall, and completely unmarriageable. At least, that's what every matchmaker, every society mother, and every potential suitor had made abundantly clear. It's unfortunate, her own mother once said, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "You have such a lovely face, Eleanor, but your stature, it's simply too much." Men want to feel protective, dominant. How can they feel that way when they have to look up at you? Eleanor had heard variations of this her entire life. She'd been the tallest girl in every room since she was 12. By 14, she towered over most men. By 16, she'd learned to hunch her shoulders, to slouch, to make herself smaller in every possible way. It never worked. The breaking point came at the Ashworth Ball, the social event of the Boston season. Eleanor had been invited. Of course, her family's name and money still meant something. She wore a beautiful green gown, specially commissioned to minimize her height. She practiced walking in a way that made her seem shorter. She even perfected the art of sitting down as quickly as possible. None of it mattered. Thomas Whitmore, Boston's most eligible bachelor, had been encouraged by both their families to ask her for a dance. Just one dance. That's all it would have taken to give her a chance at a normal life. He took one look at her standing at her full height, laughed and said loud enough for half the ballroom to hear, "I'd need a stepladder just to kiss her goodnight." Perhaps she'd be better suited to joining the circus. The room erupted in laughter, and in that moment, Eleanor felt something inside her crack, then shatter, then reshape into something new. She didn't cry. She didn't run. Instead, she walked out of that ballroom with her head held high, literally high. No more slouching, and she never looked back. 3 days later, she packed a single bag, took the money she'd inherited from her grandmother, and bought a train ticket west. If she couldn't fit into their world, she'd find a world where she did fit, or she'd carve one out with her own hands. The West didn't care how tall you were. It only cared if you could survive. Eleanor discovered this within her first week in Cheyenne, Wyoming. She arrived with her Boston dresses, her proper manners, and a naive belief that out here, she'd find a place to belong. What she found instead was a harsh reality. A drifter tried to rob her on her second night in town, assuming she was an easy target. Eleanor fought back with a fury that surprised them both, and a local ranch hand had to intervene, firing a warning shot that sent the man running. "You need to learn to protect yourself," the ranch hand, an older man named Jim Copper, told her. "Out here, being able to handle a gun matters more than being able to handle a teacup." Jim taught her the basics, but Eleanor took to shooting like some people take to music or art. It was as if she'd been born for it. Her height, the very thing that had made her an outcast, became her greatest advantage. Her long arms gave her a steadier aim. Her commanding presence was intimidating before she even drew her weapon. And years of being told she was wrong had forged an iron will. Within 6 months, she could outdraw Jim. Within a year, she could outdraw anyone who dared to challenge her. She stopped going by Eleanor Hayes, the Boston reject. She became Eleanor Morgan, taking her grandmother's maiden name. And soon, those who'd seen her shoot started calling her Longshot Morgan. She traded her dresses for men's pants, boots, and a gun belt. She couldn't ride or shoot in a corset anyway. Let them stare. Let them whisper. She'd spent 18 years caring what people thought. She was done. Eleanor started hiring herself out as protection for wagon trains and cattle drives. It turned out her reputation as the freakishly tall woman who could shoot was a valuable asset in the Wild West. People hired her out of curiosity at first, then out of respect after they saw what she could do. She was fast, faster than men who'd been gunfighters their whole lives. And she was smart. She didn't get into fights she didn't have to. And she built a reputation not just for speed, but for honor. By 1883, 5 years after leaving Boston, Eleanor Longshot Morgan had become a legend. Stories about her were told from Montana to New Mexico. Some were true, like the time she held off 6 bandits single-handedly to protect a family's wagon. Some were exaggerated, like the rumor she could shoot a fly off a horse's ear at 50 paces. But all of them added to her mystique. She had built a life for herself. She had become powerful in a way that had nothing to do with marriage or high society. But she'd never forgotten the laughter at the Ashworth Ball. She never forgot what it felt like to be told she was too much, too different, too wrong. Which brings us back to that morning in Deadwood, South Dakota. Eleanor had been passing through, buying supplies. She'd been living her life on her own terms for so long. She'd almost forgotten how cruel people could be. The 3 men at the store, Carter Williams, Dutch Hayes, and a young hothead named Tommy Shaw, were typical frontier bullies. When Eleanor walked into the store, Carter nudged his friends and said, "Well, look at that. A woman playing dress up. Sweetheart, you lost. The freak shows the town's over." Eleanor ignored them. She'd heard worse. But Dutch continued, "Bet she couldn't get a man if she paid for one. What man wants to wake up next to that?" Then Tommy, trying to impress his friends, walked right up to her. "You know what you are, lady? You're a mistake. Nature's joke." The store went silent. Everyone watched, waited. Eleanor slowly turned, looked down at Tommy, and said in a voice as cold as a Dakota winter, "I'll be at the Golden Nugget Saloon at sunset. If you're brave enough to back up your words, meet me there. Bring your friends. Let's settle this." "Settle it how?" Carter asked, his bravado wavering. Eleanor's hand moved to rest on her gun, casual but deliberate. "However you want, but one way or another, you're going to learn that mocking people has consequences." And now, she stood in that saloon doorway, watching the 3 men squirm. They'd come, probably hoping to intimidate her. The whole town had turned out to watch. Eleanor stepped inside, her boots echoing on the wooden floor. She moved with a confidence forged in survival. "I gave you a choice," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "You can apologize publicly for what you said, or we can settle this the hard way." Carter stood up, trying to look brave. "We ain't apologizing to no freak." "Wrong answer," Eleanor said softly. Her hand moved to her gun. The men scrambled for theirs. And in that split second before the guns cleared leather, Eleanor thought about the girl in the green dress. Thought about the laughter. Thought about every person who'd ever told her she was too much, too tall, too different. Then she drew. What happened in the next 3 seconds would become one of the most talked about moments in Wild West history. The kind of story told and reveled around campfires, printed in dime novels, the stuff of legend. But right now, in this moment, with her hand closing around the pearl handle of her Colt, with 3 men reaching for their weapons, with an entire saloon holding its breath, Eleanor Longshot Morgan smiled. Because win or lose, live or die, she had become exactly what they said she could never be. Someone who mattered, someone who stood tall, someone who made them look up. The guns rose, time seemed to slow, and Eleanor's finger found the trigger. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more tales from history. We'll see you in the next one.